Hey guys, I wanted to come back. Last night I couldn't really just do something more long-winded about my views and my thoughts because I think I would have just gone on an emotional rant. And I know some of you love that, but I think this situation wasn't the right thing. Um, I was kind of in shock. I will say that I was not expecting that, and I think I had to go away a little for a while and just well, it was late at night anyway, so I needed to sleep. But I just needed to think about this because emotionally I've invested so much, right? A lot of us have. Or so many of us have done that. Not just content creators, but the people who tune in, who view, who watch the content, who have, been very supportive of various content creators as well. Bought merchandise, sent super chats. Everyone is invested. Even if you've only watched one video, you spent your time following this. Now, for me, I always said I come into this because the film meant something. And, I've talked very openly about my situation with my ex-husband and the abuse and trauma I went through. And this, for me, coming onto this case, right? I mean, I just started with, a couple of comments on an X post, like just, oh, they filed this. This is what that means. And, oh, I'm really glad they did this. And just basically giving very, very generic opinions on some of the legal writing. And then my confidence started to come, and I was finding my feet again because I'm not even joking, right? My marriage broke down in 2017. And until this case, I have been pretty much, I've kept myself to myself. I don't go out really. I don't do much. Even the man I went on to marry, like afterwards, my current husband, we'd known each other since I was 14. In fact, we were each other's first love. So I already had a foundation, and if I hadn't had a foundation, there's absolutely no way I would have got remarried. So it took everything actually, and I really put myself out there to, initially just do some written posts and then kind of transition into YouTube and, speaking, going on people's show. I remember the first ever live stream I did was with Popcorn Planet. It was Elsie's birthday fundraising thing, and thankfully there were a lot of content creators on there, many of them who I'd already been kind of speaking with. Again, we're not speaking like writing messages, etc., and speaking through messaging, but that was so nerve-wracking. I nearly didn't do it. I nearly didn't do it. And I'm still at a point now where, I've been okay to put up a photo of my face, but I didn't really want to go on camera. I've always said I don't want to become a meme. But and I will do one day. I still got some confidence I need to get. And as I was building kind of confidence, I got subpoenaed, and that was the first real threat to my privacy again, and it was absolutely devastating. It really was. I don't actually say this loud enough. My ex-husband, his abuse involved, controlling like things like my phone and having access to accounts or creating accounts, and monitoring my location and so on and so forth. Just it was, he had eyes on me at all times. Even in the house, there was cameras, and inside and outside the house, and it was an absolute nightmare. And at one point, I didn't ever think I was going to get out of it. But So so when Blake Lively's like sends a subpoena, and it's not it's looking for my location, my name, address, and bank accounts, and so on and so forth. But it's like, whoa, my God, it just felt like I'd been taken right back to where I'd been. But I had to put on my big girl pants, unfortunately, and I was like, I was not gonna give up without a fight because I didn't want her to have it, because she wasn't careful with people's information. She doxed people over and over again, and I had nothing to hide. So part of me was thinking initially, do I just let her have it because there's nothing there anyway? But then I remembered then how utterly useless she is at keeping people's privacy safe, and I was like, no, I can't. And in that moment, I was grateful for all the knowledge, skills, and experience I had. I had all the tools I needed to be able to write a motion to quash, which was effective. It worked. She withdrew it. But from that perspective, like, I feel like, I can only speak for myself, but I'm pretty sure other content creators will feel the same, especially the others who were also subpoenaed. I'm sure we all feel like, wow, we put in so much of us into this. Like, how has it just dramatically come to an end like that? And I kind of went back and forth, and I was like trying to work out what's the motive from each side. What's the inducement that's been offered here? Because TMZ are reporting that no money's been exchanged. Now, they could only know that if one of the parties has told them that. So, I take it with a pinch of salt, because, they may well have been told that. But if they haven't, there's nothing on the docket, nor will there ever be, that will tell them, what was agreed to. And I can't imagine then that if both parties are walking away with no money, like, have they just turned around and said, right, Lively's gone, actually, I want to get out of this, and Wayfarer gone, yeah, sure. Are we serious? Because they had the upper hand. The evidence was entirely in their favor. That's just it. They had that pending motion for judgment on the pleadings as well. So, and we saw when Lively tried to withdraw her intentional infliction of emotional distress and negligent infliction of emotional distress claims, Wayfarer were, no, not unless you agree to this. No, not unless you agree to this. So there has to be something. I can't believe that Lively would just go, hey, I want to get out of this. I got to go to the Met Gala in a couple of hours. And Wayfarer would just go, yeah, sure. Because, we've now seen she was trying to hide evidence, but also she lied about that in her deposition. That is, that's one way to just, her credibility then would have been an issue at trial. On top of that, there is no evidence that she retaliated. Sorry, that they retaliated either. Now, if I was Wayfarer, I'd say there is one thing on there that it does not help their case. And it doesn't prove that they did anything wrong either, to be very, very clear, but there may be like associated guilt. But it is all the revelations about Melissa Nathan and Jed Wallace. They clearly have a history of, being hired, and when they get hired, there is some smearing going on. Smearing someone, as long as it's not defamatory, is not actionable normally. The reason it is actionable in Lively's situation in this case was because Lively had, complained of discrimination and harassment due to a protected characteristic, in this case, her gender, and then she hadn't complained about it, i.e., she had engaged in protected activity. And she was alleging, well, you smeared me in retaliation to me raising a complaint about sexual harassment I experienced in the workplace. And that then, you connect all of those dots up, that then makes smear campaigns, or, you know, just basically talking shit about someone, makes it actionable. And the thing is, right, is there was clearly nothing defamatory going on, because it was Lively's own words, her own interviews that were just coming back. So I think that was the one chink in Wayfarer's armor. But again, the fact that Melissa Nathan and Jed Wallace have taken that kind of action, the kind of smear campaign action that Lively is alleging she experienced, the fact that they've done it before for other people does not prove anything. It is not proof that Wayfarer did it to Lively. And in fact, there was a lot of evidence that even refuted that, such as real-time messages saying this is not us, this is organic. The fact that so many of us have come out and gone, no, I did not like how you come across in the interview. No, I did not like the way you were promoting alcohol and hair care, about such a serious themed movie, but you weren't, you never seemed to touch on that theme. It's like she wasn't even acknowledging domestic violence. In fact, Lively even went on stage, or sat in an interview quite a few times actually, and made a point of saying this movie is not about domestic violence, it's about hope. And I'm sorry, but if you're portraying a movie with sexual violence, with domestic violence, that is not the time for hope. It's not. You are. That is your experience in the moment. Is fear, and survival. Hope comes later. But to be honest, and again, drawing on my own experience, I'm still waiting for hope to show up. Like I will never be the same person again. And no amount of therapy will help that. You can't undo what has been done. You can make the best of it. But when you're just trying to make the best of what you've got left of your life, I think hope's a strong word. Yeah. So I wonder now, where's the chink in Lively's case from my perspective? Well, I don't think even that, aside from the the text messages with Sony saying that she wanted stuff deleted, and then the fact that she lied about that in her deposition months before, that's going to be a big problem. I don't even think Lively is the problem here. I think Ryan Reynolds is. It has just come out that actually he's an even bigger control freak than we all thought he was. And Reynolds has a history of trying to control and kind of taking over movie franchises. He did it with Deadpool. Ashley did a great series on his attempt to do it with Blade. And we now have the unsealed messages where he has clearly done that to It Ends With Us as well. Like, and I remember sitting thinking, my God, does this woman do anything for herself? Like, and it's absolutely wild. What I've learned is she has zero talent. I mean, her acting is awful. So I thought, okay, maybe she's got something. She can do something behind the scenes, because her style is awful as well, right? So far, nothing is looking great. And then you think, okay, maybe she can put together a film. Maybe she's quite creative that way. you know? No, she wasn't even doing that. That wasn't her. Her husband was making all the decisions, and then they were leveraging, um, Ari Emanuel and Tom Rothman, and I think that has been incredibly embarrassing for Ryan Reynolds, right? I think I don't see how he comes back from this either. I'm sure he will, but I do think that that was incredibly embarrassing, and there may have been people coming down on Lively saying, "Get out of this now," because had she been had she taken the stand, she would have been asked about all this stuff. Ange Giannetti and Josh Greenstein would have been asked about this stuff. And it's incredibly embarrassing for Lively, for Sony, because I think we all said it. It was like, a row of dominoes all falling at the same time where everyone was like, "Oh my god, why is Sony not being sued here?" You know, they were making decisions despite the fact that there was a contract between Sony and Wayfarer which expressly stated that all decisions will be, a 50-50 mutual agreement by Wayfarer and Sony. Sony were overriding Wayfarer. They were making decisions without Wayfarer even knowing about it. We've seen it. It's in the messages. They had, like, they were, enabling Lively to make changes to things like the credits and so on and so forth. And then further down be a message saying, "Yeah, Wayfarer doesn't even know about this." Why? That's your partner. That is a really fucking odd way to do business when you are not communicating with your partner. And I think people were set to be highly embarrassed. So there may have been pressure put on Lively to get out of this now at this point. But the timing was lovely for her, okay? Because she got out of it, and then despite being so traumatized that she could barely leave her house or her bed, she managed to go to the Met Gala, which is just absolutely wild. Although I will I will show you this. I'll come back to that document in a minute. According to Met Gala, she wasn't even invited, which is hilarious. But I'm gonna go to this this video. There's not gonna be any sound, right? But I just wanted to oh, I wanted to show you this. Hold on, let me 1 second, sorry. As always, I have technical issues. But I want to show you this because I think it's important to see how reluctant anyone is to help her on the stairs with this dress, right? In the past, they've always been there, rushed to her side. But she's trying to get up with the stairs with this dress, which, in my opinion, by the way, just looks like she's picked up her bedspread and wrapped it round her waist. That's what I don't like this dress at all. And that's what I think she looks like. But, no man wants to go anywhere near her after, all of this now. And it's fucking hilarious. Eventually, they do take one for the team, but she is really left to struggle for quite a while before anyone's like, "Oh, all right." So, well done. I'm going to start that again because I hadn't shared the thing. See how he runs away. Nope, walks back again. She's still struggling. And in the end, they have to go and help her because she's holding up other people now. And then some poor brave soul, takes her arm. Okay, that was funny. So, yeah, and then of course it's going to generate headlines, right? Which I will come to in a minute because I'll go to Ashley's written about this, and Ashley's always right when it comes to PR. She's always right. This pisses me off. Okay. This is a pedestrian, and they have written, look at this headline: Blake Lively takes a victory lap. Anyone who thinks that she won, by the way, she didn't. She did not win. We now know, what she's really like and how she speaks about people behind the scenes. We know we know a lot about Taylor Swift as well, and either that friendship is dead or it's not. We'll find out. If she gets an invite to the wedding, then we'll know that it was an act. The fallout was an act. But this is, I think this is absolutely gross, right? So there's misleading headline that she takes a victory lap. No, she did not. She didn't win anything. But look at this. The picture they've used of Justin Baldoni is that's from the Vital Voices award show. That's the award that he had rescinded because of this woman. And they used that picture. But yeah, look, it's a bedspread. Like, it's almost like they go out of their way to find the most impractical outfit to wear. Because she looks stupid then. Yeah. Let's go and find Ashley's page. Okay. Ashley says, so the settlement was released hours before what is being positioned as a triumphant comeback. That wasn't an accident, sorry. And I agree with her. I agree. It's a redemption arc. Because it drowns out these stories, right? It drowns out the stories of the case as well, right? Now we're all talking about her being at the Met Gala in a ridiculous dress. But Ashley calls it every time. And I will say she also says this as well. She didn't settle so that she could attend the Met Gala. People have this backwards. They released a statement today to coincide with this, so these headlines drown out any negative. It was a coordinated PR release today. 100%. If we have learned nothing about Blake Lively, it is that she is entirely PR focused, right? The lawsuit I don't think was ever intended to make it to the end. But I also don't think Wayfarer did either. I don't think they really intended to start a lawsuit, but I have said, right, and this, now I'm going to get on my soapbox a bit. I lost count of how many videos I have done defending Freedman and his tactics to the death. Okay, when you're a lawyer and your client comes to meet you for the consultation, your initial consultation, and they bring you their little documents, their contract that's been breached, text messages, whatever evidence they've got, they bring it to you to say, hey, this is what has happened. And you go through and you ask questions to kind of glean the merits of their case. What law applies here? What's the prospects of success? Because no lawyer is taking on a case that is going to obviously lose. Okay. I mean, a lot of times there's not even a trial needed. It's like, oh, they owe me money. Can you write them a letter, please, to, threaten to sue them if they do not pay? Or it might be a will. It might be a child arrangements order. Maybe they want a divorce. Many divorces can happen without ever going to court, certainly in the UK. In fact, you only really go to court when you need a court order then on, how assets are going to be divided or putting in any arrangements for children, etc. If you want a straightforward divorce without dividing assets, without a financial arrangements order, it's called. If you want a straightforward divorce, you never need to go to a court at all. You can do it all online. So, so when you have that initial meeting, right, and you're asking those questions, you're trying to glean what are the merits of the case, what's the prospects of success, what is going on here? Like, you know, am I the right person? Do I practice in the right area of law, or do they need someone else? Like, is the issue, on the surface, does it look like a breach of contract, but in reality, like there's a tort here, and we need to be referring to, bridge in the other section, that kind of thing. But the other thing you do is you say to the client, what are your objectives? What do you want to achieve from this? And what is important to you? And you tailor your case. So I have seen so many creators, some of the legal creators as well, say, Freedman did a bad job. I would have done this, this, and this, and this, right? I get it. And if you're looking at purely a legal position and what you would have done, that's fine. That opinion, your opinion is fine. And it's perfectly okay to have a different opinion. But the thing is if you're saying, well, I would have done this, this, and this, and this, then that's, to me, that's not good, because everything is client driven. So if you're rushing off and making decisions that the client doesn't actually want you to make, well, that's a problem, straight off. Now, I'm 100% sure that Wayfarer did not want to engage and go through a lawsuit. I don't think they wanted that at all. But they were faced with a crisis in the form of the New York Times article, right? And the world hated them. They were dropped by their agent, Wayfarer and Baldoni. They were dropped by WME publicly. Liz Plank walked away from the podcast publicly. You had a bunch of celebrities coming out and in support, right, of Blake Lively. And then the Vital Voices Award was rescinded publicly. You even had Sony, right? This is the fucking goal of it all. Even Sony come out in support of Lively, despite knowing all of this. They said they would do 12 more films with her. Even though behind the scenes, they were calling her a terrorist. Are you fucking kidding me? So anyway, so as a lawyer, right, and you're having that consultation and you're trying to understand the case that's being brought to you by your client, but you also need to understand who is this client, right? What's important to them? What is their objective? What outcome are they looking for? And then you tailor your advice to that. You take into account what they want. You don't just say, okay, well, I can do this, this, and this. Like, we can all say, I can do this, this, and this, and this. But it's important to know the client, right? Because your relationship with that client, you're going to be driven by that client. The client is going to approve everything you say and do, right? If people think that the complaint that Brian Freedman drafted was not put to Wayfarer, all of the Wayfarer parties, and then, approved by them before it was filed, then, reality check here, it was 100%. Everything that's been filed on the docket from any party has always been approved by the client. Always. And the client can say, oh no, can you take that out? I don't want that. Or can you add this? Can you say something about this? And the lawyer's job is to draft it and word what they're looking for in a way that is persuasive, that makes use of the law, and represents their client's interests. And if you got lawyers that are saying, well, Freeman did it all wrong, I would have done this, well, then you would never have been the right lawyer for Wayfarer, because that's not what they wanted here. And that's not a shot at any of the lawyers commenting on this case. But I feel like, 50% of my job here has been to defend Brian Freedman's reputation. And I stand by it, because we now see it playing out in full throttle. Why do I think that? One of the reasons Wayfarer were comfortable enough to settle without a public retraction or apology is because of the job Freedman did. Because they had their reputation was so bad when Lively first made her allegations, but they had not responded. Right, that little brief moment, everyone believed Lively, except me, quite possibly. I don't know. I literally don't know anyone else who actually, straight off the bat, just did not believe her. But I didn't. But they had everything against them. They didn't have the star power that Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively had, right? So they were coming back like Johnny Depp, right? Let's just take a moment to look at the Johnny Depp case, right? People loved Johnny Depp, right? Unquestionably an A-list star, right? Married to a D-list actress. It was like Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively, to be honest. But, you know, in this situation, Justin Baldoni was the one that was going up against Blake Lively, and he was not an A-list star. So, but in Johnny Depp's case, right, even though he won his case, there is still an awful lot, I mean, an overwhelming amount of people who still support Amber Heard. Even though we witnessed the whole trial, we saw everything, there is still so much unwavering support for Amber Heard, right? Why? Because I don't think the PR of it was hit hard enough. And it didn't really start to get addressed until they went to Virginia. So for years, there just wasn't enough work done on the PR situation. Okay. And the love that Johnny Depp had largely came from the fact that people just loved him as an actor. They knew that he was a good person. They knew of the good deeds. The charity events where he turned up as Captain Jack Sparrow at the hospital for children. We all knew that he was a really nice guy. We knew there was a side of him that could be a bit wild. I'm not going to say it's a bad side. I don't think it is a bad side. It's someone likes to have a drink and so on and so forth. Then who am I to say that makes him a bad person? But he enjoyed his life, shall we say. And he had his own demons as well, so again, I'm not going to judge someone who relies on things because they've experienced so much trauma from a younger age. But there was an association with some of the company he kept and some of his habits, which, Justin Baldoni did not have that, right? He was entirely, you can't find a bad story about him until now, right? But if someone had got onto the PR side immediately, as soon as Amber Heard filed for her restraining order, TRO, then I think there would have been less. I think there would have been far more support from the outset, and less for Amber Heard. So Freedman had a bigger job to deal with, actually, if you look at it, because Justin Baldoni did not have Johnny Depp's star power. So what did he had to? Yeah, and you had Blake Lively, who's being supported by Ryan Reynolds, and they put this story with kind of cherry picked evidence, we'll call it, into the New York Times, right? I mean, Amber Heard was a hell of a lot more subtle. She didn't even name Johnny Depp. So Lively went at it with a sledgehammer in comparison. And then Freedman got on right? Now, he didn't even sue Blake Lively. He sued the New York Times, right? Then she filed, so then they filed. And people keep saying to me, "Oh, yeah, but it wasn't a serious complaint." No, I know. I said that. That was literally my first comment on X of ever. My first comment about this entire case was me literally saying about both Lively and Baldoni's complaint, this is not a normal complaint. This is not how we are taught to write complaints in law school. And it's not. But what it did do was it got all of that evidence crammed in there where we actually saw Wayfarer told their story, and they backed it up with evidence too. And then we were like, "Hold on a fucking minute." We all paused and went, "Oh, maybe she's not telling the truth, or maybe she's embellishing here. What's going on?" And we all stepped back. You see, Johnny Depp didn't get all of that, but we all kind of stepped back and went, "Hold on, there's more to this." It's not as simple as what she's saying. There is more to this, and we need to look into it. And then we started to look, and then we found all the videos, all the interviews, everything, that resurfaced effectively, because we were all, I think, at the same time, like, we were all looking at the complaint and then looking at Lively, remembering how she was promoting the film, going, "Hold on a minute." But then when Freedman filed that complaint, it's like a million-piece jigsaw just fell into place. And we all suddenly went, "Oh." Like, literally, I think that could have been echoed around the world. And it made sense then. And I mean, many of the content creators I've collaborated with, they were initially very much, like, believing Lively when her complaint was filed. But they are now staunchly, pro Justin because of the evidence that they have seen. And that's what would have happened with the jury. So if anyone thinks that Freedman did not um Freedman did not read the brief, then they are mistaken, because it was entirely, let's just get his reputation back. Lively wasn't going to give it back. I don't think she could have given it back. They would have said, "Oh, she was being pressured, forced, whatever." Even though her sexual harassment complaints have been dismissed, they'll say, "Well, that was a technicality." It's not, by the way, but that's how it's being spun, because there's always spin to these things, as we saw with Amber Heard. Oh, well, technically, yeah, she lost this, this, and this, and this. She lost all of the entirely in the case that Johnny Depp brought against her. She won one little element of her counterclaim, right? And that's it. And that was technical as well. That was just about the wording. It was not because anyone believed. It's not because anyone believed that Amber Heard had actually been abused. So the bounce back that Justin Baldoni had, entirely because of the way Freedman wrote that complaint, was almost immediate. It was almost immediate. And that is brilliant lawyering, because I have no doubt he can put together a hell of a good complaint. He knows what he's doing. But restoring someone's reputation to a point where it's not even, like Justin Baldoni, we all now know who he is. He's doing better than he was before. So is Wayfarer. Before he was, a relative unknown. Some of us knew him from Jane the Virgin. Some of us knew him from 5 Feet Apart, or from Clouds. There were things that we knew of him, but he wasn't like a standout star. Now I'd say he's achieved that, because we all know who he is. And we all know that he did not sexually harass Blake Lively or retaliate against her. In fact, we all now know that her and Ryan Reynolds, along with some of their friends in the industry, stole the movie or tried to take over the movie. We know Holly Colleen Hoover, you know, basically stabbed him in the back. We know so much more now about Brandon Sklenar and Jenny Slate and Isabella Ferrer. We know stuff about, we know Sean Levy is quite happy to interfere with another director and call him up and tell him what he must do and mustn't do, how to handle Blake Lively. And I think this is just wild. We know a lot more about Matt Damon and his wife. So if anyone thinks that Freedman did not do a stellar job, you're mistaken. You're wrong. He did exactly what the client needed. He just wanted his reputation restored. On that note, on that detail alone, Freedman knocked it out the park. But, and that's exactly what the kind of lawyering I would have done is. So, yeah, and, it even took the risk of being sanctioned, right? Now he ended up with a reprimand. So did Fritz's firm, right? Okay, that was a small price to pay. For them, anyway. That was a calculated risk. And they decided to take it. Because if they hadn't, if they tried to, just file a lawsuit, then the damage would still be there. And it would be harder to repair as time goes on. So I think they made the right decision. And I think Freedman is a freaking genius. And that's it. I will always argue back against the naysayers. And again, a huge shout out as well to all the other attorneys that on this case. They all did a fantastic job, and at the right time when Freedman was like, you know what, I'm going to let someone else kind of take the reins here. And the filings, you could see him tightening up and getting increasingly serious. And, he did it at the right time. So, yeah, I'm happy with what he did, actually. Now, I suppose the next question is, well, if there was no money exchanged, according to TMZ, which, again, we'll never know. So, and TMZ could only know that if one of the parties has leaked that information. But if no money's been exchanged, then what's the inducement here? Like, I thought it would be from Wayfarer. I thought they would say, I tell you what, take the section 47.1 motion fee off the table, because that is still there, right? And it is not going away. For the simple reason is it's not part of the Lively Wayfarer lawsuit that's just settled. It is part of the Wayfarer Lively lawsuit that was dismissed last year. And as the case was dismissed, effectively that makes Lively the prevailing party. She technically won, I guess. In that a lawsuit was brought and the judge decided that, it shouldn't have been brought and dismissed it. So she's now asked for the fees, including the treble damages, etc., and punitive fees, costs, attorney's fees, etc. I thought maybe there would have been a negotiation to take that off the table. And I would have thought they would have also negotiated the same thing. Like, well, if you're going to take that off Wayfarer, would they have done the same thing for the motions fee that she has filed in Texas against Jed Wallace? She's also seeking the section 47.1 remedies there. But yesterday, this was filed, and basically, so Aaron Nathan, Michael Gottlieb, and Kristen Bender have all filed their pro hac vice motions to be admitted to the docket. So, not a strong indicator that they're looking to shut this down. And there is still a pending appeal as well there with Wallace. So, there's nothing that's telling me that he's going to withdraw that. It would majorly suck, though, because I don't understand the Section 47.1 fees against Wallace. He clearly was nowhere near any sexual harassment, and despite liably attempting to say that he's trying to punish her, so he punished her by retaliating for speaking out, I just don't see the motive of punishing someone you've never met, you don't know. Why would you do that? But it's a very real situation we're in here that, Wallace could get ordered to pay all of that money. I don't know. So I know that a lot of content creators are feeling a bit pissed off and feeling like, what, you just walked away, and basically they felt that, Wayfarer could have made Lively accountable for her actions, not just to them, but to other people. Unfortunately, it's not how that works. It is Wayfarer in this lawsuit, right? There's a lot of stress, right? Even as a lawyer, when you're preparing to go to trial, there is so much stress. And that's your job. But it's stressful even for attorneys. So I can understand and fully appreciate if someone says, "Do you know what? I'm at my limit now. Enough's enough." Or if if your opposition comes to you and says, "Is there any way out of this?" and you're like, "Do you know what? Yeah, I'm done." That happens far more than you think. Trial is it's quite an intimidating environment. It's an incredibly vulnerable environment because a lot of your private communications are having to come out. Like, as much as I don't like Amber Heard, I'll be honest, right? But I will appreciate, like, when she got on the stand and had to talk about some very private things, even though I don't believe that they're true. Like the incident, when she was describing the incident where Johnny Depp was allegedly raping her with a bottle, right? That is not, if that had really happened, that would have been so much harder for her to talk about. Same with Johnny Depp having to talk about, when his finger got cut off and just kind of recall all of that. These are not easy things to do. And it doesn't even have to be that personal. It could be your finances. People don't want to share that. That's personal. But there are no secrets when it comes to a trial unless they're hidden under a motion in limine. So and these trials, especially when you are a celebrity, are very, very public, as we have seen. So I can understand why both parties were quite happy to just get out of there. Also, Wayfarer have still got other things going on. There is the case against them from the New York Times, from Harco, the insurance company. Sauritz and the Wayfarer Foundation are being sued by that Celeste Smith. Freedman's got a case going on as well from the estate of Travis Flores. And that's not even, his workload. This is just his firm is being sued. So yeah, there's a lot going on, and Lively, I think, has probably now come to the realization that the longer this goes on, the worse it looks for her. And despite her best efforts, the headlines are just not helping her. People can see everything for what it is because we're not idiots. And Ashley, like I say, Ashley was absolutely on the money, as always. In terms of the PR, this case has always been about PR. And again, that is why I am very much like Freedman did exactly the right thing. Yes, to most, legal professionals, some of the steps he took will probably make them question or recoil or go, "Oh my God, why did you do that?" I personally, everything made sense because this was never a lawsuit, in my opinion. It was a vehicle to generate headlines, predominantly from Lively's side, but Wayfarer have to respond. They are also public figures, and they have a reputation they need to fight for and to restore. And again, Freedman was a absolute overwhelming success in getting back Justin Baldoni's reputation. And now we all know who Jamie Heath is. We all know who Steve Sarowitz is. We know who Melissa Nathan is. We know who Jen Abel is. And Jed Wallace. We have found out some things we don't love about, especially the PR people. But we have absolutely fallen in love with Justin Baldoni and Steve Sarowitz and Jamie Heath. And I think that's good enough, because at the end of the day, what trial would there really have been? Even, let's just say the motion for judgment on the pleadings had been granted, which I really do think it would have been. We would have been this whole trial just for a breach of contract claim, which I don't even think should have been there either, because, Lively did not contract with, for that agreement. It was not her contract. It was Blake Link's. So there was not much left. But what I think Lively did, and this is the bit that annoys me, is that stipulation came in. Now I know that it was for trial purposes only. But the judge didn't actually kind of get to the point where he could grant that. And Lively clearly didn't agree to it either. But it's there on the public docket, Wayfarer effectively saying, okay, for the purpose of this, we can agree that she engaged in protected activity. Lively has now got something that will generate a headline. It's publicly filed. And, we're already seeing from the settlement that, the headlines that Lively is taking a victory lap. And yet there's no victory here at all, because her lies have been exposed. Her motives have been exposed. How the industry as a whole operates and gets behind people has been exposed. Because Sony were the partnership of Wayfarer. WME were the agency that represented Wayfarer. Wayfarer was one of their clients. Same with Jonesworks. Wayfarer was one of their clients, right? And they absolutely, all of them, shit on them from a great height, even though they knew full well what was going on. Stephanie Jones knew that Blake Lively was trying to take over that movie. She did. But yet she wanted to hurt someone and, just be vengeful against Jen Abel. And Baldoni and Wayfarer got caught in the crossfire. And then WME were, the Baldoni and Wayfarer were clients of theirs as well. But they actively worked, like Sony, they worked against them in favor of Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively. And Sony was supposed to be business partners with Wayfarer. And yet they made all these decisions. And if they went on the few occasions that they did ask Wayfarer to agree to something, if Wayfarer actually tried to say no, they got threatened. So it's a really ugly industry. But I can understand why everyone's like, you know what, fuck it, I've had enough. And in that situation, it's disappointing, but it's not unexpected. And I do understand why fellow content creators as well are, kind of disappointed and feel like Wayfarer have given up easily, or, they should have fought on. But, at the end of the day, Wayfarer never said they were fighting for anyone else. That was Lively. Lively said she was doing it for all the women and the girls. Clearly not. So where we are now, I've said my piece. Where we are now, we have got a bit more to do. I've had some lovely messages from my video last night. I'm not going anywhere. Some really nice messages saying, "No, don't go, don't leave us. I'm not going anywhere." I will. There are still other cases going on that are related to this. There's obviously the choreographer case for the Deadpool and Wolverine dance sequence. I call it that, but it's not. It's the NSYNC dance sequence that was used in Deadpool and Wolverine. I've got the Celeste Smith case against Saritz and Wayfarer Foundation. We've got the New York Times case against Wayfarer. We've got Harco's case against Wayfarer. The Travis Flores case against Brian Freedman. I am still following the Macron, Candace Owen and Macron case. There's not much going on at the moment, although apparently her lawyers have left. Candace Owen's lawyers have. It sounds like they might have fired her. I don't know. I will have to look into that and do an update though. And we've got other cases as well. So when the Russell Brand case takes off, I will cover that. I've got the Ian Watkins case from the singer of Lost Prophets who was murdered, the paedophile singer who was murdered in the UK. His murder case is coming up. I think that's due to start in May, actually. And there are others I can't think of right now, but there will be plenty of others. But obviously, this was the big one that, kind of just gave me something to immerse myself into. And I found myself while I was covering this, I was like, my focus on my own trauma, it really helped because, I kept my mind occupied to arguably, in some cases, too much. So I'm now looking for that next thing. So if anyone's got any ideas of what case they would like me to follow, let me know in the comments and I will go and take a look at them. But there are still, like I say, I mean, I know they're not moving as at fast pace and they're not as intense as Lively Wayfarer, but there are still all the side cases that still need to be, tied off. Okay, guys. Thank you for listening. Thank you for all your support. I really loved covering this case. I've met some lovely people. I've met some not so lovely people too. And I got a subpoena, but I've enjoyed it. And at the end of the day, I have to accept Wayfarer's decision. It's obviously the right one for them, and I wish them all the best in their future projects and hope that they do bounce back. Ideally, I would love to see, like most of us, the Justin cut of the film or a sequel with, a new cast. I don't know if we're ever going to see all of that. I'm sure they want to just leave all of this behind them because it's probably traumatic for them. I wish the very worst for Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds and all the sycophants that enabled her to act like a complete and utter bitch.